From personal experience, I'll tell you, buying a piece of raw land to build your dream home, whether that's a retirement home, a weekend getaway, whatever, if you're going through that process, it can be absolutely grueling, especially if you're married. I mean, there's a reason that people talk about building a home together is one of the leading causes of divorces, and it caused plenty of strains between my wife and I. But if you are married to this fact, and this is what you want to do, I'm going to let you in on quite a few secrets in this video. So grab a piece of paper, a pencil, sit down, and let's get to work. I'm going to lay it out for you, my experience, what to avoid, what to do, how to protect yourself, how not to lose money, and end up actually with the product that you want at the end of the day. All right, so let's start with the basics, acquiring the land and financing, okay? If you've got the cash to do it, great, you can do that. Cash isn't the only option though. You can go out and you can finance it. There's a couple of different ways to do it. If you don't really know the house that you want built yet, you can start out with financing just the land. Raw land loans they're not hard to get, but you're not gonna get them from Wells Fargo or Citibank, CITI Bank, and I point that out because one of our local lenders here is CITY Citibank, different thing. So you're not going to go to one of these large mortgage companies to get financing for raw land. Okay, that's going to be done by either credit unions or one of your smaller banks, or in Texas, we've got a thing called Capital Farm Credit, which is a credit co-op for farmers here in Texas. And farmers is a loose term. You can be a general person. I mean, we bought 30 acres using loans from Capital Farm Credit. I was not going to farm anything on it, but if you're starting with raw land, that's the basic get-in point. Now, it's not going to look like a traditional mortgage. You are likely going to have to put in more than 15%, and usually it's going to be a 20 or 25%. You may be able to find a local bank that will allow you to do 10 or 15% down, but usually it's going to be 20 or 25% down, and your interest rate's going to be a little bit higher than call it a mortgage on a home, just because raw land is a little more risky for the lender. So you need to keep that in mind. That interest rate can be 1.5 points higher than an average mortgage rate at the time. So that's one thing to consider if you're going to be financing. You could go after a seller and try to do seller financing. Completely cool. Sometimes you can save a little bit on the lending, on the interest rate. Sometimes you can negotiate a lower down payment, but seller financing is good. One note on that, make sure you have a good attorney and you close that in a title company just to make sure that that seller has the right to sell you the land. I've heard stories about sellers selling via owner financing, taking 10 or 20% of that land value up front, getting paid, and then the buyer finds out that seller never had a right to the land and they never bought it. They just gave that person a lot of money. So make sure you protect yourself there. The other thing that you can do here is if you know what your house is going to look like, you've got plans for it, it's all been engineered, you have a builder ready to go, you can go and get directly to what they call a construction loan. And a construction loan is going to finance the building of your house, the construction of it. Obviously, that's what it's called. What that construction loan usually entails or can entail is the purchase of that land up front, including the construction, and you're going to carry that until construction's complete. And then at that point, you've got to transfer from a construction loan into a permanent mortgage on your finished product. Now, there's different types of construction loans, and I could go into all of this, but generally 1 and 2 time closes. A 1-time close, you're going to basically do all the work up front, and at the end of that, you have your final mortgage locked in. So it's going to look like a construction loan, but at the end of it, when you close it, your mortgage is going to be locked in. And a 2-time close is you're going to close up front on the construction loan, the construction's going to happen, and then you're going to go to closing again. Now, 1-time close, you do have one set of closing costs, which is a good thing, but depending on when you're getting your loan, think about the interest rate environment. If it's going to take a year to build your house and you're at a high interest rate environment when you take out that loan, if there's a chance interest rates could go down, you may want to look at doing a 2-time close just because you don't necessarily want to lock in at that higher interest rate. But if you're in a low interest rate environment and it looks like rates may go up in the future, then maybe you do want to do a 1-time close and take advantage of that 1-time closing cost part of it. That's another way that you can finance it. So cash isn't always king. There's multiple ways to skin a cat. You can do that land loan, you can do a construction loan, and you can also do a 1-time close construction loan, which will get you out the other side completely. But again, if you're going to do a construction loan, which is still going to be done by your local banks and your credit unions, again, you're not going to go to Wells Fargo for a construction loan. But if you're going to do that, you're going to have your plans together. You're going to have your bids from your builders together. You're going to have to take all of that stuff to your lender in order to get that construction loan. So make sure that you take care of that up front. Now, if you choose to go the financing route, don't worry ahead of time about buying an appraisal, before you start getting that loan. The bank is going to require you to get an appraisal along the way. Some people don't know that. An appraisal might run you $400, $500, $600 on a piece of property, but if you're getting a loan, the bank is going to take care of that. Now, if you're paying cash, okay, maybe you do want to get your own appraisal in there, especially if you're doing owner financing. You're probably going to want to get your own appraisal on that. But even before that, you can get a really good idea, especially if you live in a state like California. I believe a lot of the western side of the U.S. are disclosure states, so you know what other land has sold for. So you can go into public records and see that. If you're in a state like I am with Texas, we don't have public disclosure of what we purchase property for here. Get with a really good real estate agent and see, hey, what have similar properties closed for, comparable properties in the recent, call it the last 6 months. That's usually what banks look at. And it'll give you an idea of, are you in the ballpark with what you want to pay for this land or what you've agreed to pay for it? Or are you a little bit high, or are you getting a good deal and it's a little bit low? So before you worry about the appraisal, you can take care of those comps up front. But again, if you're getting a financing through a bank, don't worry about it. The appraisal is going to be taken care of during the process. If you're getting owner financing or you're paying cash, make sure that you're getting an appraisal just so you know that you're not overpaying for the property. Now I'm going to start to get into things that are pretty important, as in, like, if you're new to this, you may want to avoid these situations or this specific situation. A lot of people love the idea of having waterfront property, whether that's on an ocean, a lake, creek, a river, whatever. Me personally, I want waterfront property. If you're new to this, beware. You can protect yourself. You can do research in FEMA floodplains and things like that. You can find out if the property is in a floodplain. But a lot of times, a small piece of property on water is going to be in the FEMA floodplain. Now, can you build in that? Sometimes you can, but what does that take? Here in Texas, you really can't build in a floodway, and a floodway is a designation that's separate from a floodplain. So make sure you understand what your state regulations and what the federal regulations are for where you want to build. If you are in a floodway, you're going to end up having to have flood insurance on this property. Flood insurance that is in a known floodway or floodplain can get pretty dang expensive. I mean, you can be doubling or possibly even tripling your insurance every year. And especially now, with hurricanes and stuff that are going on, a lot of our insurance carriers are just jacking up the cost of flood insurance and also windstorm insurance. So if you're looking at a waterfront home on a beach or something, okay, now you got to understand flood insurance and windstorm insurance. There's a few ways you can potentially get around that. So let's say that your property is in FEMA floodplain, but it's maybe only 2 or 3 feet in the floodplain. Well, you can haul in a lot of fill dirt and build that base up above the floodplain, and you can get an elevation certificate, and you may not have to get flood insurance, or it'll greatly reduce the cost of your flood insurance. But if you go a different direction, and you see a lot of people, especially on the beach, they put in pilings and they have these houses that are elevated. Okay, that doesn't change your flood insurance, because technically those pilings that go down are a part of the structure, and if any part of the structure is in the floodplain, your insurance is going to be way up. So the only real way to mitigate that is to build up the actual dirt up out of the floodplain and get an elevation certificate on it. And again, you're probably still going to pay a premium. And if it were me, I would definitely still get flood insurance. Even if I got the base of my house out of the floodplain, I would still get flood insurance, but that price is going to be a lot cheaper. So all of this to say, if your dream is to be on water, make sure you know what you're doing. And if you don't, you have got to get somebody to help you through that process so that your house doesn't get washed away at some point. Make sure your builder knows what they're doing, that they've built in that situation before, but B, also to try to lessen the amount of money that you're outlaying for insurance. Again, if you can get away with it by building up that base, that's a huge way to save a lot of insurance money for the entire time you own that property. Next major part of this, and I'll repeat this over and over in videos, Get your boots on the ground, but don't just do it once. A lot of times you'll go out to a property. I've seen people just kind of walk the front little bit of a property and they're like, oh, this is great. It looks flat. The trees are beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, okay, I'm good. And as a realtor, I'm like, no, we've got to get into the property the first time. We've got to get in and look at, if you're not experienced in it, find somebody who is. Look at the soil. Are there a bunch of rocks? What kind of rocks are there? I mean, personally, there's a piece of property in Colorado that I absolutely love, and I want to buy it for a vacation home, but it's about an acre, and almost all of it is one giant granite boulder. But you can't really see it from the road. It's not until you get into the property that you see it, and you can see the way it slopes back is that there's dirt at the road, and there's kind of trees. They're small trees, they're stunted, but you can see them as you get onto the property, and then you see this big giant boulder. Well, that poses a lot of risks because can you build on that? Yeah, you can fasten in, but what are you going to do with your septic? What are you going to do with your well? You can't put a well in on that thing. You can't put a septic tank on top of a boulder. So make sure you get into your property. And then also, just because you walk it once, if you've got a builder that you're going to use, and by the way, I would identify your builder up front. You can develop a set of plans and get builder estimates on what it would cost and then kind of change those plans, but you still know who your builder, the lower costs are going to be. But if you've got your builder identified, get your builder out on that property, because here, and it happened with my house, the one my wife and I built. Bought the property, I'm like, man, the top of this hill is flat, this is going to be an easy build, so cheap. Take my builder out here, and he looks and he goes, okay, well, you're going to have about 4 foot of slab exposed on the southwest side. And I'm looking at the site going, there is no way that there's going to be 4 foot of slab exposed. This is a flat site. And he went and he got a string level, and he went to one side of the house where I had it staked out, and I went to the other side, and there was over 4 foot of slope on that, which increased the cost of my slab about $10,000. Now, that's not a huge cost increase, but what if it was 6 feet, or what if it was 8 feet? And I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of foundations, I've seen a lot of land, I've seen a lot of houses built, and I was wrong. If you haven't done a lot of that, you could look at a piece of property and go, wow, that's really flat. And if you want to build a larger house, you may have 6 or 8 feet of foundation, and you may end up with a slab that overruns in cost by $50, $75, $100,000 just in concrete and labor costs. So you've really got to understand the lay of that land, what's there. Get your builder out there, or get somebody that is really, really comfortable with building, and get them to analyze the site also. Now, does that mean you may have to go out to the site more than once? Yeah, probably, but you need to do that anyway. Get out on, hopefully you can get out there when it's raining. Hopefully you can get out there when it's dry. Hopefully you can get out there when it's windy. Maybe, if you're in the mountains or something, get out there when it's snowing. And I know that doesn't really lend itself to seeing a piece of property and buying it quickly, but you're talking about buying something and then building a dream on top of that property. I would really, really encourage you to slow down a little bit, make sure that everything is right. Now, if you have zeroed in on a location, like let's say you want to build in the Texas Hill Country, and you've been eyeing that location and you've lived there before, and you understand, okay, these plants mean that there's wet ground over here. This type of tree means that all of this soil is sandy. This type of tree means there's a lot of rock. If you have that knowledge, okay, yeah, you're going to be able to move a little quicker. Or if you have somebody on your team that has that knowledge, you can move a little quicker. But if you don't have that knowledge, like me in Colorado, I've got to go out there multiple times, and I've got to look at that piece of property and analyze, and get out there with my builder up there and with my realtor up there. And yes, I am a realtor, and I have a realtor in Colorado because I don't know enough about that market. You've got to get on that property over and over and over and identify potential pitfalls, things that may run your construction costs up. And again, make sure you're making a decision long-term that's gonna not cost you a crap ton of money you didn't anticipate. The next thing is local insight. Again, if you are from the area, cool. You understand what little back road creeks flood, which ones don't, where the giant chicken and hog farms are and stuff like that. Okay, not a big deal. But If you're not local, I'm in the Texas Hill Country. We've got a lot of people moving out here from the Houston area that were in oil and gas and CEOs and stuff like that. And their dream has always been to move to the Texas Hill Country and have something out here. Okay, not necessarily local. So what I encourage them to do, if possible, talk to the neighbors, talk to local people. Let's say you're trying to buy a piece of property in Blanco, it's a small town. Go there for coffee, talk to some of the locals. If the locals don't want to talk to you and they treat you like trash, maybe you don't want to move to that community, which definitely doesn't happen in Blanco. They'll answer every last one of your questions. But B, you have to learn the lay of the land there. And if you can talk to a next door neighbor to the land you want to buy, you might learn some important things. Hey, maybe Tesla just bought 500 acres, Elon Musk bought 500 acres, and he's going to build the boring company right next to the property that you're looking at buying. You might not want to be next to a major manufacturing and construction thing like that. Maybe the neighbor behind you, and it could be a quarter mile away, but maybe they've got a hog farm, or maybe they've got a cattle feedlot that you can't see, and you haven't seen it from Google Maps because as you get higher up, you really can't see what it is, but the neighbor knows. So make sure you get that local perspective. And again, it might be a neighbor, it might be a realtor, it might be a builder, it could be your banker. We've got a banker here, Trey Powers, Citibank Mortgage at CITY Bank. That guy knows everything that is going on around Dripping Springs, Wimberley, Johnson City, in this area. He's a great resource. Not only can he loan on it, but he is so tied into the community. He knows where things are coming in. So make sure you're getting that local perspective. And again, if you can't find a neighbor, find somebody else who knows that area intimately. It could absolutely save you, because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to build my dream property and then every time the north wind blows, I smell something like a cattle feedlot or a city dump. Yeah, I don't want to smell that. Another really, really big point is make sure you understand what you can actually do on that property. A lot of people don't know, just because a property isn't in an HOA does not mean that there's not deed restrictions on it. In Texas, we've got this thing called seller imposed deed restrictions. And if somebody goes in, and a lot of times you'll see this with old family properties where, there might be 500 acres and the family wants to keep 50 and they're going to sell off the other part in 10-acre pieces. Okay, that's fine. It happens a lot. That's what we're seeing, a lot of as our older farmer and ranchers are, passing on, and this land is coming down to the kids. But if somebody's going to live in that original house for a while and they don't want you to be able to do things on your property that annoy them, they're going to put in seller imposed deed restrictions. So what they can do is they can limit how big of a house you can build. They can limit what kind of house you put on there. Some of them, I've seen some really, really nice mobile homes at this point. Just amazing. But if there's a restriction that the seller put in that you can't bring in a mobile home, well, you can't build them. I've seen restrictions on modular homes. I've seen restrictions that you can't build a house over 25 feet tall because they have a piece of property and they have a view and they don't want your house obstructing their view, so they may limit how tall you can build. Some of them put restrictions on barndominiums. You won't be able to build it. So understand what you can build and if there's seller imposed deed restrictions. Also, maybe you're in the ETJ. Maybe the ETJ is an extraterritorial jurisdiction. It's got other names in other parts of the country, but in Texas, an ETJ is, like Austin, Texas. Here's the Austin city limits. Well, Austin is going to annex an ETJ so they can have higher taxes out there, but they don't have to provide water and EMS and fire and stuff like that. They're just going to raise the taxes a little bit to increase their tax base. Inside of that ETJ, they also impose additional restrictions on what you can and can't do. So make sure you understand where your property is. Make sure you understand what's the zoning, what are the ordinances potentially that a city or a county is imposing on those, and again, are there any seller imposed deed restrictions or ETJ restrictions or something like that. Make sure that what you want to do on your property can actually be done. While we're talking about deed restrictions and things like that, the next major point is make sure you understand the permitting process in an area. And again, if you're intimately familiar with the area, you live there, you may have explored that already. But this is where a builder comes in key. Again, having that builder set up front is really, really important, because if, for example, Austin, Texas, I know at this point that if you want to build something in the Austin city limits, your process of getting a permit is going to take forever. You're looking at potentially 9 months to a year just to get a permit before you can even start construction. So if you have to get those permits after the fact, your construction loan may expire before you ever get your permit, and then you're going to have to extend your construction loan. So that could potentially affect the timing for your loans and everything else. So make sure that you're talking to somebody who's familiar with building in that area. And you can always go to the entity, again, City of Austin, you can ask them, call planning and zoning and say, hey, how long does it take to get a single family construction permit? And they might tell you the truth, or they may tell you kind of what their office answer is, and it's not anywhere close to a fact. So make sure you have somebody in the area that you trust that you can go to and plan out, because it's a part of the process. And I can tell you, when I built my house, I thought design was going to take about 3 months, max 2 months, because I really had a good idea of what I wanted. I didn't know what was entailed with architecture, because even though I thought I knew, I built houses and I designed stuff and I got that part of it. Even though I thought I knew, when we sat down with our architect, he was like, okay, we're probably going to be meeting with each other a minimum of 5 months. And I'm like, Al, you're out of your mind, man. I know what I want to build. I just need you to clean it up and polish it up. 6 months later, and it wasn't because of Al, it was making decisions and changing designs and all this other stuff, we finally had our plans. So it was 6 months for that. Then we had to pick our builder, because I didn't have my builder up front because I didn't know what house I wanted to build. So we had 6 months of that. It took me about 2 months to pick our builder, because when you get a bid from a builder, it's not instantaneous. It's not going to be a week. It's not going to be a 2-week process, because with your builder, they've got to go in. Like, it's not like it was when I was a builder. When I was a builder, I was a part of a crew, and we built the house. We put in the foundation. We did everything except for plumbing, HVAC, painting. That's pretty much it. We really did everything else. It's not like that anymore. Your builder is a general contractor, and they have subs for everything. They may have 15 or 20 subcontractors that work under them. So the builder takes the plans, gives them to all of their subs, and they have to wait for the subs to give bids back. And then the builder has to go and he has to look at the bids. And then he's got a markup, so he's got to adjust the bid for that. But if any of the subs screwed up, then he has to go back to them, make sure that it's right. So your process of just getting bids on your house could take a month or two, depending on the contractors in the area. So now you might be 6 months in for your design. You might be 2 months in for getting your builder, and then they're going to go to permitting. So we're at 8 months. And again, if it's an entity like City of Austin, you might be 9 months permits. All of a sudden, you're at, 17 months, a year and a half in before you can actually start construction. So you've got to have all this stuff in mind and really understand what's involved in it up front. Because I'm telling you, if you don't know, if you haven't, if you're married and you haven't prepped your husband or your wife for this long process, you could be 6 months in and you got your spouse breathing down your neck going, hey, I thought we were going to build a house. What's taking so long? And now you're a year and a half in, you still haven't started the house. And they're like, what the hell? We have a 2-year balloon on our land payment and we haven't even started our house build, and we've only got 5 months left to get lending taken care of for the rest of this construction process. So that's why, again, it leads to stress if you don't have all of this information up front. Make sure you're taking care of understanding the process, understanding the timeline, understanding the length of time that it takes to do this up front. And again, especially if you're doing this with a significant other that's never done it before. The next major thing, and I think this might be the hardest part of this, is do not develop an emotional attachment to a piece of property too quickly. Again, let's say that you want to build on a hilltop, or you want to build waterfront or something like that. You've been searching for this property. They're hard to find, right? You've been searching for this property for years, and you finally get your eyes on it. It comes on the market. You're like, holy cow, this is the most amazing property. And you go out and you walk it and it's flat, and you check the FEMA records, and okay, it's in the floodplain, but only by a foot, and I can build my foundation up higher. And you're getting excited, and you're, oh my gosh, like this is the one. You finally figured it out. You've got to not develop an emotional attachment to it, because along the way, there's so many things that could possibly get in the way of you actually doing what you want to do here. And all of those things come from your due diligence. Again, if you develop that emotional attachment really quickly, but then you start looking into the deed restrictions and holy crap, I can't build the barn dominium that I wanted, or I wanted a 2-story house because this thing has got an amazing view of the lake, but there's a seller imposed deed restriction by the house across the street that that limits my house to 18 feet because they went out and measured it like I did on my property with a PVC pipe to find out, hey, how high can this house be before it's too high and it's going to obstruct my view. Don't get that emotional attachment until you've done your due diligence and you've got your T's crossed and your I's dotted, and you know now, okay, I can do what I want the way that I want, and this property is absolutely perfect. And on top of that, that the timeline works out, because again, let's say that you're that oil and gas guy out of Houston, and you know you've got 5 years before you're going to retire, and you have enough time, and you've prepped your wife that, okay, we're going to buy this property and we're going to design the house, and then we're going to get our permitting done, and by the time we start construction, I'll be 18 months from retirement, and that house will be done in 18 months, just as I'm walking out the door, and I'm telling Anadarko, we'll see you later, I appreciate it, but I'm moving to the Texas Hill Country. Even when you get all your due diligence done, there's still a lot of stress on the backside of this. So keeping that emotional excitement, keeping that suppressed, and making sure that this is a methodical thing. This is just like when you went to college or when you were getting your next job and all this stuff. It's this step, then this step, then this step. And if you get too excited, you may end up overlooking something. Don't do that. Keep those emotions in check. And your spouse may do all of these, and whether your spouse is husband, wife, whatever, there may be all these up and down things. Step back, allow them to get that emotional attachment, that emotional high. You're going to want to try to prevent them to do it, but I know you can't tell them what to do, but at least be the cool prevailing mind in this, and knowing that nothing is done until it's done. Because if you think it's done, or if you try to rush it in anticipation, and I got to get this done and I got to buy this property before anybody else sees it, that's when mistakes are made. Try to avoid getting that emotional attachment. And just a quick chance to reiterate here. There's a process to this, okay? If you're not familiar with this process, find somebody that can help you through it. It could be a builder. It could be a lender. It could be an agent. It could be your best friend. Doesn't matter who. If you don't know every step of the process because you've done it multiple times before, and I'm going to step to the side a little bit for a second. Guys, building a custom home on acreage or on a lake or on a river is not like going to a production builder like KB or Coventry or Lennar and building a house with them. It is a completely different process. Just for starters, let's say you're buying a Lennar home and you go to the design center and you can pick from these 5 different tile variations, or you can have these 3 different color schemes on the outside of your house. Building a custom home is not like that. Absolutely nothing like that. When we built ours, the builder was like, what tile do you want to use? And I looked at my wife and she looked at me and we're like, yes, we're going tile shopping. And this was the first time I ever built a house. And so you walk into Lowe's and you walk into Home Depot and you walk into Floor and Decor, and there are tile selections everywhere. That's just the tile. Then you've got sinks, then you've got faucets, then you got door hardware, then you got roof color, then you got roof types. All this other stuff, completely different animal. If you are not familiar with this process, make sure you find somebody to guide it through you. And I know a lot of times people hate agents, they hate realtors, oh, the damn realtors. I'm telling you guys, if you don't know a builder, there's no better place to go than find you a realtor that is familiar with an area, because they're going to have 3 or 4 custom home builders that they can refer you to, people that they've worked with, people that they know. So even if you hate realtors, they may be your best friend. You just have to find a great one. If you don't know somebody in the area that you want to go and buy your property in with the expectation of building this dream this dream home on it or whatever it is, call me. Let me know, because I've got agents everywhere that I trust, people that are like me, that really, really understand the process of building and that have those recommendations locally. Even if it's in Central Texas, call me. I'm the one, because I know them. I've got people that I've been working here with for 15 years that have done it. But if it's out of state, let me know. I'll probably have a good recommendation for you, and I'd love to pass that along, because I've met so many amazing people in my time that are doing the exact same work as I.